Everyone, it's time for another edition of Beaver Banter.
Beaver Sports Talk lives here.
Presented by Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. This is the Beaver Banter podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner, joined as always by Ian Rivers. And Ian, we got a friend of the program who's rejoining us today. Why don't you introduce him?
Yeah, back for the second time this season, assistant men's basketball coach, Jake Masek. Jake, how are you doing today?
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a busy time. I know we talked a little bit, you guys have got a couple games underneath your belt when we talked last, but now you guys have gotten some conference games in. We're kind of in what we always call the meat and potatoes of the schedule here in the NSIC. Had a few games here and just kind of in that early portion, just to give us the lowdown. What have you seen out of the guys now that we've started conference play?
Awesome. Yeah, obviously, playing without Tate is a different look for our team, which we've been out for, without him for a bit now. It's been, a stretch where some guys have had to step up and fill in new roles. And I felt like they've done a really, really good job of doing that. Things that have presented themselves. We talked about last time, the rebounding is still something that's really big for us. I know in our last game, people might have saw we burned a 30-second timeout and we just stood there with everybody and just kind of, hey, we've been saying it for 3 weeks. So, that's going to be the difference between us winning and losing. And, Northern got 3 offensive rebounds in a row. So our point was pretty easy to get across in that moment. But a great response from the guys. And I think overall, we're feeling really good about where we're at. Obviously, with 2 teams in front of us, which are right there. And we're looking right at them with the records that they have and where we're sitting. Would have loved to have gotten that Jamestown game. And that's a one for the ages. We'll remember that for a long time. But being up 8-9 points in the second overtime is something that I can point to. And some of those same issues do present themselves. But I feel like, talking about guys stepping up, Johnny Pekarich, JP, as we call him, stepping up huge in the scoring department, but also, he's been a guy, he needs to be a two-way player because he can't score 30 points and give up 30, right? You want to be a positive. So, that's been really big. Henry Shannon leading the conference in blocks per game is big and getting on the glass some more. So guys stepping up, maybe playing different roles. And then, Dom Fairbanks has stepped into a big role as the point guard over the last couple games and kind of ordered things. And, it's tough to play point guard in this league, and asking him to do that is, maybe a guy who's a little bit undersized is something that carries a lot of responsibility with it, and, made some great passes in our last game, and including the lob to Henry that ends up winning us that game. So, guys have stepped up, filled their roles, and, we're going to ask them and keep pushing them to get to new heights with, where they're at. But I'm really happy with how the guys have responded to multiple players going down throughout this stretch of the season.
Yeah, offensively so far through the first 10 games, you guys have been buzzing. Obviously, your specialty defensively, but 83.8 points per game. What has been working so well offensively for this team so far to start the season?
Yeah, I know when Tate went down, there might have been some worry. Obviously, a guy, he's pretty much our offensive hub. Like, he was pretty much our point guard in a sense, if that makes, kind of like a Jokic-esque role for him this year was kind of what we envisioned, which he was filling in great. The thing that I think helps is, we really have a, more European ball screen style offense, which is built on movement, gives people more touches, gets the ball going side to side would be more of our goal of it. And, maybe big to big passing is bigger in that. But I think it's the shooting. It's the spacing the floor, shooting it so well. Dom, JP, Eddie is a 50% three-point shooter right now statistically. So that all helps. And Isaac Sieverts has always, been a great guy at stretching the floor and making, he only takes great shots. So that helps out a lot. And I think it's that inside out of the offense and getting sides back and forth has helped a lot. And, if you can shoot the ball, you're tougher to guard, obviously. So our ability, our guys have been working their butts off in the gym. And that's where it all comes from. They get a lot of workouts in with me as well, but, the credit goes to them in terms of getting in the gym. And that's something we've emphasized in the preseason coming into the season. And, that won't stop regardless of the result. But I think it's the floor spacing and being able to stretch the teams out, put them in long closeout situations. And as many times as you can put a team in long closeouts, it hurts the knees, but it also gets rough for the other team.
Yeah, exactly. And, to look at, again, that offensive production, you guys have been a really strong offensive team, again, to kind of piggyback off that one of your leading scorers, as you mentioned earlier with Pekarich. What is it about what he's been able to do that just makes him a tough guy to guard?
Yeah, I would describe it as almost kind of awkward. He's kind of, long, skinny, like legs, you wouldn't walk into a room and be like, wow, that guy's averaging, 20 something points in the best Division II conference in the nation. You would never say that. He's really intelligent. He's more shifty than people give him credit for. And I think that's something he's developed. You've probably seen those pullbacks, hezzies. Those are his favorite moves, the behind the back. The stride stops, making guys fall over on that for a little fadeaway. He's layered his game as he's gone along. He really was just more of a shooter. In that sense. And now he's been put on the ball, has to create off the dribble. And I think it's that shiftiness, that change of speed, change of direction. He's not, the most fastest guy in the world, but he's got quick twitch to him where he can change from slow to fast. He doesn't get downhill in a super fast line. But, adding stuff like his left hand has gotten great finishing at the rim. He's showcased that over the last 2 games. And he just works in the gym. And that's something you can only ask for. Out of the best is they get in there, they work, and he's layered his game to where he's a 3-level threat. And there's not a lot of shots he'll shoot where, we'll be like, oh man, that's not a great one. He can score at all 3 levels and he can score well. And I think it's almost that awkwardness. I don't really know what the word for it is, but that's kind of the awkwardness of his game. He's got long limbs. He can change. He's quick twitch, and obviously you've got to guard him way out at the 3-point line. So that helps anybody, get downhill a little bit more. And he's worked very hard to get to where he is right now.
It's almost a little bit like Victor Wembanyama in a way where it's like the NBA is obviously an evolving league, but like if you see a guy that tall that has the ball handling skills that he has, it's like, how do you guard it when he can do everything? And that's maybe that's a tall comp for Mr. Pekarich, but we'll go with it. But
yeah, I got to recruit some players. You're asking me to get Wembanyama out to Bemidji or what?
Hey, if he's got eligibility.
References, so it's all over the place. I love it. It's great. Looking at this team defensively and just kind of going over the course of the season and trying to get through kind of these early conference games, what is it about your team defensively that you guys feel like you've been kind of excelling at? What's kind of some of the early things that this team has been able to really do well as you guys try and get that groove?
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with being able to switch and guard well in space. That's something that's important and been emphasizing. The outside of the Moorhead game, which they did rain down 3s on us, but I wasn't thrilled with how it started. If you give people wide open shots and they get hot, I'm going to have no sympathy for you. Given the fact that anybody's great in NSIC, same thing. You give JP 2 wide open catch and shoots, he hits 3 more in your face. I'm not really going to feel too bad for you. So in the same sense, I know they got hot in that game, but I didn't really feel like we did a great job of, we want to take away something from the other team, and something that we've done great from St. Leo. That was a great performance of taking away the paint. I want to get as few paint touches as possible has always been my kind of approach to it. If they can't play inside out, they have to play, a little bit more away from the hoop. And I'm a little, preferential to 3s that are shot without getting a paint touch. In my mind, just making those contested and tough and will live. And obviously long 2s are anything a basketball coach will tell you. And that's how we force into late shot clock. But I think recently it's been the switching aspect. We've been switching a lot more recently, staying underneath, containing, and then maybe showing a little bit more stuff in the press that has slowed teams down getting into their offense. We just played a spread offense, which they want to get as much time on the clock as possible. And when we started shortening the game with our press, we slowed them down and they got into their offense with less time. So that was kind of something that I felt like really shifted the game. And it's a credit to the guys to buying into that, because usually when I say press, they want to go, run and get steals and stuff. And that was more of a press for the sake of slowing them down and getting into our switch, and making sure that we're underneath everything. So I think it's that. I think it's the switchability and being ready to guard. But I would also give credit to positioning for the guys. Dom Fairbanks, I mentioned earlier, he's a little bit undersized, but I rarely have to tell him he's out of position at anything on the defensive end. And that's something that I really want to see across the board from all our guys. And JP's been a tremendous leader in terms of stepping up and being like, hey, I need to be better on that end. I know I'm leading us in scoring, but if I can be better on that end, that increases our margin. So guys stepping up and taking ownership, and I don't want to say getting pissed off if you get scored on, but myself, I wouldn't be too happy. So
you brought up the offensive rebounding earlier this episode. You have a team coming into, I believe your games are at home, correct? This coming weekend.
Yep.
Yeah, you have a team coming into the BSU gymnasium in UMary who averages over 14 offensive rebounds a game. How do you kind of combat that as something that's maybe been a bit of a struggle so far this year for the team?
Yeah, I mean, it goes through practice, but it also goes into film, just showing them the lack of, sometimes attention to detail. I think sometimes we take breaks, and it's probably, a little bit on me emphasizing it more. Not, they were taking breaks maybe on a defensive rotation on the opposite side from the ball to start the year. And now it's, hey, I'm not going to hit and contact my guy, or I'm not going to check on this one. And just showing them that a lot of guys in NSIC are relentless. They're not going to stop. They're, you might hit them once. They're going to show up and crash again, because that's their role and that's their job on their team. I felt like, Northern, they have a couple good wings who rebound really well. And our wings did a pretty decent job against them, but we missed some blockouts on their bigs. I felt like that were pretty significant. So just re-emphasizing that as we go into the game. And, I think Mary does a heck of a job. Like, there's no breaks across the board from their team. And it's really impressive for a first-year head coach to have his team playing like that. So for us, it's a technique thing. It's hitting and contacting, but at a certain point, it's just effort. And it's getting lower. It's going and finding the person before they attack you. And that's something that we're emphasizing, because a lot of times guys are running in at them, and if they have momentum coming in, we got to go find them. And, that goes back to having an attack mentality on defense. Shot goes up, we got to finish the possessions. We have a great defensive field goal percentage. It's first or second in the conference. And our record should not be where it is, with that being the defensive field goal percentage. So can point to, not having active enough hands, not getting enough turnovers. And the other thing is not rebounding well enough. So we got to get those fixed if we want to get to where we want to be.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you what makes a great rebounder, and then you pretty much just answered my own question. So you're right on the ball. You're being efficient here today. I want to go back defensively too, to looking at just a couple things that kind of jump out on the stat sheet. Mainly the 23 blocks early on coming from Henry Shannon, and just how important has he been kind of coming into this team, and how has he kind of found his role on the defensive end, and just kind of talk about his game and what you like.
Yeah, I know I talked about last time I was on here, the ability to switch and guard and stuff like that. I think I've been on him to be more active on the perimeter, in the gaps, everything like that, not take as many breaks and be a force on both ends and play with that force. He's great at timing. That's something, guys throw pump fakes. I think Chet Holmgren is a good one to point at. He never goes for pump fakes. Anything like that, he stays down, he's on balance. And Henry's great as a help side defender. So coming over on the baseline side, I can think of, two we had just our last game, coming over on the baseline, blocking shots, altering them. And he's great at meeting them at the apex as well, at their highest point, and getting them out of there. And it's really a timing thing. It's an aspect we probably missed last season as well with our shot blocking. I think our numbers were pretty low in terms of that. So got to keep protecting the rim, but it's his timing, getting over, showing hands, effort on that. But it's also his willingness to play above the rim, which is something he loves to do. So he's got to continue to be that for us, because, being shorthanded, especially in those positions, he's going to have to rack up a lot of minutes. So it's being consistent, but it's also, we're asking a lot of him. So got to protect the rim and establish that, right? I don't want people to score in the paint. So it always helps to have a shot blocker.
The turnover margin for this team has not necessarily been something that's been super great this year, statistically speaking. What can you guys do to kind of help right that ship as we enter 2026? Yeah,
you are correct on that one. Not thrilled with where that is at. And obviously, I think that's one of our things we need to fix with a high-powered offense. What's holding us back when you look at it? That's pretty much, you hit the nail on the head with that. That's one of the things that is significantly holding us back in terms of you're not able to even get a shot up or into your offense at all. I think it's, execution is one thing. I think the movement of Dom into the starting lineup has helped a bit in terms of taking care of the ball a little bit more. And, it needs to be collective across the board. It's things like one-handed passes have been brutal for us. Passes into traffic, not playing off two, stuff like that hurts us across the board. A lot of them, that I'm seeing are very, very avoidable. It's off stuff like that. It's not seeing, a lot of teams are loading up to us on the strong side, and we're not seeing the skip passes, and we're trying to play through traffic a lot. That's where I'm seeing a lot of the turnovers come in, and whether it's a secondary ball handler or a primary, they're just not seeing those passes right now. So that's something we got to get better at. We got to hit the roller and let them decide to make the skip pass, or we just got to make the skip pass, which makes sense. When you have, a high-powered offense, they're going to have to load up to stop something. So I don't blame them for doing that. But, when you got Eddie on the other wing, or you got Dom on the other wing, why are you not swinging the basketball is a very fair question to ask, or JP. So, those guys need to continue to be ready to make some shots. And I think, they can be frustrated, but it has to be a team collective thing that we have to get done. And I'd say that's the biggest thing. They're loading up to the ball, and we're maybe not getting sides enough, and we're letting that affect us a little bit. And that's where we got into trouble against Moorhead, is not moving the ball quick enough out of their screen coverages, the ball screen coverages. And that didn't go well, as you guys know.
I know that, obviously sitting at a 2-3 conference record through the first 5 games, and, I know that MSU Moorhead game didn't go the way you guys wanted, but still, very competitive team. You guys are right there with them through a lot of the game. And, as you kind of look at how the North shakes out this year, when you look at these games, how excited do you guys get? I know that there's things you guys want to work on. There's things you guys want to get, but, where this team can be in terms of the North and how good they can be just overall, how excited are you guys still that we can work through some of those and become the team we want to be? How far away do you guys feel like are you guys from becoming like that team that you feel like can compete in the NSIC?
I honestly think from the top down, from Coach Boshi and we feel like, we're those turnovers and that rebounding away from being right there, which are two, pretty fixable things. Their effort and attention to detail things. It's a wide open conference this year. Just saw Jamestown take down UMD, who we were in a very competitive game with before Tate went down, obviously, in that one, and it didn't go well for us over the stretch. And they went on a huge run against us, so I'll give them credit as well. But we just went to triple overtime with Jamestown too, and a very winnable game. I think it's a night-to-night thing. The conference is pretty wide open in general this year, and it's probably the most wide open it's ever been. I mean, you see SMSU was projected to win with the whole thing, and on their side of things, they've been struggling a little bit. So it's an everyday thing. You can't get too caught up in the politics on a day-to-day. It has to just be wired in on the next team. But this week, with how it lays out and their current records, is extremely big for us. So our guys have been locked into, we just got the win at Northern, but we aren't satisfied. And, Christmas, we'll be in the Christmas spirit regardless. We're not going to, be mad or anything, but Christmas would be a lot better if we do take care of these two going in. It's better coming out of break. And if you look at the stretch we have coming out of break, it'd be a lot better to get these two. So I think it's a night by night thing. And Coach Boshi has echoed that to the team, that this is one of the wide open years he's seen, with, Jamestown coming in and playing so well, and other teams, may have lost some players and don't have as much coming back, but every team is anteing up. And, we'll face a team this week in Mary that throws a lot of stuff at you. And then we'll face a top 3 scorer in NSIC from Minot State. So every team has a different look, different stuff in the arsenal for us to handle.
Yeah, it's a big weekend, like you said, with those two teams that are right above you, and getting those 2 wins will definitely kind of throw you back up right to the top there in that race. You mentioned that the break is coming up here. As you guys get to that break and past this weekend, you got a little bit of time off. What does that look like in a sense? Is it kind of light, or is it like, hey, we're really trying to hunker down on this or that? How does a team go about handling just kind of a break in the action, everybody getting out of their routines? Do you use that as an opportunity to work on wholesale things? Do you just kind of take the workload off? I guess, what is the philosophy that goes into that little time off, and how do you make the most of it?
Yeah, it's really, really important, because when you come back, you hit the ground running, and it's a stretch run, like you've mentioned before. I think, it's about, for us, it's about making the adjustments in terms of the 2 things I just mentioned, with rebounding and turnovers will be the focus for us in that stretch. Obviously, it gives us some time to probably get healthy, which is great. If they want to make the break longer, we'll take it either way. But it's about focusing on those things. I don't think it will be wholesale adjustments by any means. I mean, the offense is great. No notes for me on that, as long as we take care of the basketball. And, obviously I'm more defensively oriented, but in practice, our offense looks great too. When they move the ball, they make it tough on us to guard them. So that's a great look for us. I think it's about, getting guys healthy, but also guys buying into what we're doing a little bit more, looking maybe a couple more things inside, and then we'll add a couple more sets, as we always do, to adjust to the teams we're going to play and maybe throw a different look at them. And coach is always doing that. He's an offensive mastermind, so he probably will call me in his office after this with 3 new ones we're looking at today and figure that out and see what we're rolling with. But I would expect us to adjust some things on the defensive end with some different looks we can throw at them, but the base of the philosophy will always stay the same. So I would expect it to just be fine-tuning adjustments. At this point, I'm not going to say we are who we are, but I think our identity is pretty much set in stone with what we want to do on defense and offense and with the current personnel we have. So we can't really make insane wholesale changes, but it's about making those little fine-tuned adjustments. And then once you ramp back up and make those little adjustments, then it's about who you're playing next. Like a normal scout week, we would just roll with that.
Yeah, of course. 2 big games coming this weekend, a little bit of a break, and then 5 straight games actually at home in the BSU gymnasium. Unfortunately, a lot of those are probably over the time when students aren't really on campus, so that doesn't help get a ton of extra energy in the gym, but it's still nice to be at home and not have to travel coming in and out of Christmas break.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Yeah, that you nailed it on the head. That when I saw the schedule come out, that wasn't my most favorite thing that I've been discussing over this time, but we can't really control that. So,
right.
It's about, we got to provide our own energy in the same way we've been on the road this last week. So we'll have kind of the same, focus of providing our own energy and being there for us. But we've had some super fan parents who have been in Florida and came down to Kansas. So I don't know if they missed a game yet. So, we'll have them in the stands and we'll just tell them to be extra rowdy, maybe, fill up the gym or something with this, a little bit more energy, but, we just have to deal with it as we roll. But it's always great to be at home, like you said, and we got to take advantage of it. And those are games we got to take care of. I think, when I look back to last year, we didn't do a good enough job of protecting home court. So that's been something that we've emphasized. And, this place has a low ceiling. And if we earn the right to get fans back in here afterwards, it's a place that can get really, really loud. And, I think about, I wasn't on staff here, but I think about the last time they were in the playoffs a couple of years ago. This place was absolutely bumping. So it's capable of getting there. And, it's about us earning it as well with what we put out on the floor and on the court. So I'm not going to say it doesn't go both ways. And, but our women's team definitely deserves support too, because they've been playing really well. So I want to make sure to mention that as well. I've been really enjoying watching them as well. I think they're playing a great brand of basketball this year, and they have a couple players that are really coming into their own. So hopefully we can get it back bumping, and hopefully we both can roll, down the stretch here and get us into a playoff berth. That would be phenomenal for both teams. And from there, really, that's what we're focused on, because like I always say, it's a one game. It's whoever's better on that day, and that's all it is. So you just take it one game at a time, like we've been doing all year.
Yeah. Ian, any other questions for Coach Masek? Well, we got him here. I got one more to kind of wrap things up, and I think this is a good way just to kind of project forward too. We'll let you've been standing on your soapbox, giving us some great insight on this team, some great things. I'm going to give you the floor here. Tell us why, we should be excited about this team. This is your soapbox. This is a team that's had some great moments here in the early part of the year. Tell us why, when things click, this team is going to be right there in the thick of things and be fun to watch. Tell us why that's going to happen, because we've seen the vision, but you're the expert here. Tell us why this team is on a track to kind of become their best selves in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think in this age of basketball, you like shooting. So you're going to see some guys who can rain down threes in quick succession and have quick release, quick triggers. They work on it. Eddie, JP, Dom. So I think that's an exciting aspect of it. Henry can play above the rim on both ends. So, that's something that's exciting to watch when you come in the gym, and we have guys who can get above the rim and play in there. And I think, honestly, the biggest thing that I would emphasize that makes me so excited about this team is one of the more connected teams I've ever been around. They genuinely hang around each other. They're probably hanging out right now. So, that's what they do when they stick. And there's been moments of adversity where, we've been hit with a haymaker by another team, and we talk about them like boxing matches. So we just got hit with a haymaker. What are we going to do? How are we going to respond? Right. There's 12 rounds or 10 rounds, or, I'm not that big of a boxing fan, so I don't really know what it is these days, but, that's what it's about. And I think this team responds to adversity incredibly well. And we're going to have that happen. It's unavoidable that it'll happen. But I think it's those two aspects. I think it's the fact that we can rain down threes in quick succession on teams. We have guys who can score inside, and then we have guys who can play above the rim on both ends of the court. And that's what we want to do. And we want to put teams in uncomfortable situations, but it's those three things that make a team exciting. And I think that's kind of the modern brand of basketball a little bit. So that's kind of what we're, buying into, is being able to shoot the three really, really well, forcing teams to get spread out. And then it's a lot more fun to watch. You got a lot more room for the guys inside to operate, and hopefully watch Henry throw down some more dunks and block some more shots.
Yes, sir. It's going to be a fun, I don't want to call it second half, but if we just kind of view it from Christmas onward, it's going to be a fun second half ahead. Big weekend for Bemidji State men's basketball coming up. Coach Masek, we appreciate the time coming on. I know it's a busy season, and we love that you want to come on here and talk about the Beavers and give us that insight of seeing those guys in practice and telling us these things. Because, we played basketball in high school, Ian and I, but we're just a bunch of rubes compared to you guys who are putting in all the work. So it's fun to get your perspective, and we appreciate it so much you want to come on.
Yeah, thank you for having me as always. Roll Beavs. Let's get these two.
Again, want to appreciate Coach Masek for coming on the program and talking. And again, we don't know a ton about basketball compared to him, and just good to get his perspective on things, and just always a really fun conversation. So he's welcome back on the pod anytime. We're going to take a moment, Ian, to talk about our podcast great sponsor, Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. Once a Beaver, always a Beaver. The Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation is here to keep that green and white pride going strong for its 50,000 graduates around the world. From scholarships that open doors for students to events that bring BSU alumni and friends together, you can get connected, give back, and leave a legacy at Bemidji State. Whether you're a proud BSU grad, a local supporter, or hey, you just love cheering on the Beavers, come be a part of the action at bsualumni.org. That's bsualumni.org. bsualumni.org. Okay, Ian, let's talk a little women's basketball. And as Coach Masek talked about right before he got out of here, the women's team has been having some really fun moments here in the early season, and has been an entertaining follow to start the year. You look at another split this weekend, it's reverse of what happened with the men. Where the women's team got a win in Jamestown, 77-61, and then came up just short against Northern State, 62-55. So, it's a really good spot for this women's basketball team to be in. 6-3 overall, 3-2 in the NSIC through the early portion of the schedule. And then, when you look at UMary and things like that, and Minot State coming up, it's just a really fun spot to see this team in early in the season, albeit, but again, just getting themselves on a good track and building that confidence early.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 3-2 in the conference, 6-3 overall. Like that's great. We're early in the season, but to have a 3-game win streak at one point in there, it's been a while since they've done that. So it's super cool to see them having such success. 2 players in, with 27 and 28 points respectively against Jamestown. And then, a tougher loss to a Northern State team. But this weekend coming up is really going to be interesting to me, because similar to the men's side, if you look at the women's basketball standings, Bemidji State currently sitting in 3rd place in the NSIC North, with games coming up against UMary and Minot State, who currently are 1 game ahead of them, and Minot State is tied at 3-2 with them. So this is going to be maybe a pretty big weekend in terms of we find out exactly what this women's team is made of. And if they can even split this weekend against these 2 teams, I think it'll go a long way towards getting these girls back into the NSIC tournament for the first time since I don't have it in front of me, but I think since before COVID, CJ. I could be wrong about that.
It's like the first year after. It's around within the last 4 years, maybe 4 years at best. Yeah, and
we'll definitely do some fact checking when it comes closer.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. It's a good spot for them to be in, and like you said, 2 teams that are above them or tied with them in the standings. UMary 4-1, Minot State 3-2. A very big point of emphasis. And then not only that, it becomes an interesting stretch too when you come back from the holiday break. you come out and play Minnesota Duluth, who's 5-0 in conference play, and then you play Southwest Minnesota State, who's 3-2. And, there's a bunch, Sioux Falls, who's 4-1 in the conference. You have a very big opportunity. Like you said, we are over the next 6 games. We are going to learn so much about this team, and it's going to be fun that they're right in the thick of things, and we can figure out what this team is going to be. To go back and recap some of the games from the weekend, let's go to last Thursday's game at Jamestown. And Bemidji State has a big day from Evan Apinga, getting 28 points in the game. Cassandra Karen, 27. Really good performances throughout the game allow them to get going. And here's the thing I really like about this Bemidji State women's basketball team is it always, maybe not always, I don't want to be that dramatic, but it does feel like in their second halves, in those late quarters, they really put out some of their best quarters of the season. And in years past, again, not to put a blanket over everything, but it would feel like, all right, Bemidji State has maybe a tough first quarter and they end up playing great the rest of the time, but it's just too big of a hole to dig out of, or they're right there at halftime and then the third quarter kind of sinks them. And that's not to say that, every quarter is created equal. They had 9 points in the second quarter of this game in Jamestown, but it was 23, 24, 21. They won 3 out of the 4 quarters. And, you look at Bemidji State's game against Northern State, they won 2 of the quarters. They lost the first quarter by a point. And then it was the third quarter where they got outscored by 11, which ended up kind of tipping things really in this. And, it maybe seems simplistic to break it down that way, but it feels like just winning 2 of the 4 quarters and avoiding, just that one where meltdown's too strong, again, of a word, but a quarter where things can kind of get away from you or put you behind or maybe take away a lead or something like that. Just a really good job by Bemidji State women's basketball to, especially in the second halves of these games, play strong and either finish a comeback or hold on for a win. And that's been encouraging to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you said, CJ, we talked about so many times last year, 1 quarter is what it felt like could sink this team. And unfortunately, that's what happened in this game against Northern. But, maybe it is a little bit too simplistic of a way to look at it, because it's like, well, generally speaking, like, how many games are you really going to just get outscored by 3 points in every quarter? It's like you lose by 12. So most of the time there's going to be 1 quarter in there that's just a little bit different than others. That's typically what happens when you break up the game and give a little bit of a timeout in between quarters. But yeah, if they can just avoid that, they've been pretty successful. The team that can have that big breakaway quarter that really can swing the momentum of the game, especially in the third quarter where it's so late, that now the pressure is completely on Bemidji State to make up that 10-point deficit heading into the fourth quarter. That can really, really do a number on an opposing team, especially on the road. But yeah, still a great place to be in for this team. 3-2. I don't think I could have seen that coming. We've been hoping they can get back here, and we'll see where the rest of the season takes us. But to be in a pretty competitive spot so far early through the season, I couldn't ask for much more.
Yeah, exactly. It's a really nice spot for them to be in. Again, looking at that game against Northern State as well, another good game for Cassandra Karen, who finished with 24 points overall. Evan Apinga with 14 on Saturday's game. So, really a couple nice, a nice weekend for her. A couple nice games put together for Apinga. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody who's listening. So, but no, it's a good weekend. And now they come up again, like we talked about, 2 teams that are above or right with them in the standings with a lot to prove. And we can see kind of how these things shake out. If you want to go back to the tail of the tape of a year ago, and again, things can change within a year, but Bemidji State had a 10-point loss to Minot the first time, first and only time they played a year ago. And then to look at their other matchup against UMary, it was a 62-50 loss. So not blowouts necessarily. And then they played UMary and lost 69-51. But again, these are teams that they were not able to best a year ago and now have an opportunity to do that this year. And I just think it's a really great sign. When you look at Bemidji State in the north part of the NSIC, UMD is at 5-0, UMary's at 4-1, Bemidji State and Minot State are at 3-2, Northern State at 2-3, Jamestown at 2-3, MSU Moorhead at 1-4, Minnesota Crookston is 0-5 in the conference in the north half That's the North standings, I should say, through this first part of the season. And again, it's good to see this team in the thick of things here as we get ready for that Christmas break.
Yeah, and any distance you can put between yourself right now, any distance between yourself and those bottom couple of teams that are struggling to get wins right now is just going to help you even more come the end of the season. The last couple of years we've been turning it on a little bit towards the end of the year, getting a couple of wins late, but it's usually too little too late. So to be getting those wins earlier in the season, now it makes it a little bit easier to get into the playoffs later on, hopefully, as we go down the back stretch.
Yeah, exactly. And, looking at the Bemidji State team and at what they can do here, I think overall trying to get that, what does this team need to do? What does this team need to keep projecting forward? When you look in terms of points scored, again, their offense is at about 58.5 points per game on average. That right now is ranked last in the NSIC. So to see a little bit more offensive output would be good. Oh, excuse me. This is last year. I don't know why I had NSIC stats. I don't know why it pulled me to.
I was going to say, wow,
that was
really low. I'm not seeing many games.
Blame the Google machine, man. I just Googled NSIC women's stats, went to the link, and all of a sudden it pulled me up to that because I looked at games played and I was like, that is not even close. All right, here we go. This year's statistics. Let's rewind that for a second. Apologies, team this year, because that number threw me through a loop. I was like, that does not sound right. Here, they're 12th in the conference with 68.8 scored per game, which is a 10-point improvement from a year ago, which has been seen with this team. That sounds better. All right, stupid CJ, what are you thinking? So overall, a really good sign going forward. And then if you look at defensively, points allowed per game, and this is where Bemidji State has shined this year. Defensively, they're allowing 63.4 points per game. And again, some of that can be adjusted for non-conference schedule, but when you look at overall the bulk of their games, 63.4 points allowed per game, they average scoring 68.8. Even though their scoring output is 12th in the conference, they still defensively are allowing less than that. And I think if you talk with the coaching staff, with Coach Stoltenberg, and how they put kind of the plan together, is a team that plays defensively and that's deliberate on offense and is looking for their shots. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody that's listening, but it's a good sign to be in when you have a defense that scoring wise is top 2 in the conference. So it's a really good development for this team.
Yeah, defensively, they've been pretty solid all season. There's a couple games outliers here and there. There's an overtime game against Crookston where they add a couple extra minutes, a few extra points on there where they allowed 76. But at the end of the day, it's a very good improvement from last season's team to this season's team. We'll see if that can stay pretty in line with where it's at right now, or if anything changes over the course of the next couple of weeks. But again, they, similar to the men's team, have 5 straight games at home in the BSU gymnasium. Ugly sweater night on Thursday, by the way. Coach Masek was talking about the Christmas spirit and how they'll stay in the Christmas spirit. Ugly sweater night will help. That's both for the men's and the women's, of course. So bring your ugliest Christmas sweater out to, I guess it doesn't specify Christmas, but I assume that it's probably
that's what it means.
If you don't have an ugly Christmas sweater, and you do just have an ugly normal sweater, just go ahead and wear that. That'll do.
Yeah, exactly. That'll work. You can kind of figure something out there at that point. Again, looking into this team defensively for Bemidji State women's basketball, if you look at field goals made for Bemidji State, again, they're sitting around their scoring average, which is about 11th in the conference. They have a team field goal percentage of 40%. But then you look at their opponent field goal percentage, they are second best in the conference with a 37% field goals allowed. And rebounding, again, getting out rebounded a little bit when you look at the standings. But if you look at the turnover margin of the Bemidji State women's basketball team, they have a 1.44, which, again, doesn't seem like a number that jumps off the page, but is 5th best in the conference because they don't have a negative turnover margin, right? So they average, with the turnover margin here, 1.44 in that. And then the assist to turnover ratio is where this team is sitting as well, kind of middle in the conference. They're about 10th, but their ability to even if they can't get the big rebounds, they as many rebounds as they want, they're a team that can limit the shots. They're a team that can get some turnovers and give themselves extra possessions that way. it's just been a good start for them this season. We can see if that continues throughout the next stretch, but overall, a really nice start defensively for this team, and it's been why they've been in the position they're at. So really cool to see. All right, Ian, we're going to talk a little men's and women's hockey. We're going to give some standings updates, while the team is at their break in the schedule. Before we do that, let's talk about the good folks at Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation.
Do you want to be a part of the team behind the teams at Bemidji State? Join hundreds of dedicated fans when you donate to Beaver Athletics and help BSU pursue its next championship. Your gift can power your favorite program, establish a scholarship for a student athlete you get to meet, and so much more. Every dollar brings the Beavers closer to raising another trophy. You can add to the proud tradition of success at Bemidji State, so don't wait. Give today at bsualumni.org/Beavers. That's bsualumni.org/BEAVERS.
Okay, Ian, looking at the men's hockey standings, Bemidji State is away. They play an exhibition against the Gophers coming up on January 2nd. But until then, we're just kind of out in the wilderness here. It was really weird to go this whole weekend and not be looking for updates from BSU hockey,
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a long month. And we're not even quite halfway through it yet, to get more BSU hockey. Of course, they, like you said, they have an exhibition coming up, but it's just an exhibition and it will only slightly scratch my itch for more BSU hockey. So, but yeah, there was some action over the weekend in the CCHA. Minnesota State took on Augustana in Sioux Falls. Michigan Tech went to Big Rapids to play against the Ferris State Bulldogs, and then St. Thomas went up to the UP to take on the NMU Wildcats in Marquette. Michigan Tech ended up sweeping Ferris, getting 6 points. St. Thomas ended up sweeping Northern Michigan, getting 6 points. So neither of those terrific results for the Beavers in terms of tightening up the top of the standings. But I guess the result that did go your way a little bit, and again, we're still before New Year's, so maybe it's a little bit too early to start chasing every single point in other matchups, but Augustana took 5 of 6 points from Minnesota State in Sioux Falls over the weekend. So again, if we're looking at Bemidji State and comparing them to Minnesota State, Bemidji State got 2 points off of Augustana the weekend before in Sioux Falls, and Minnesota State was only able to take 1, and that was in a shootout loss to the Vikings on Saturday. So if you look at the standings right now, all of a sudden Bemidji State is one of the teams up at the top, at least, that has fewer games played than a lot of the teams around it. Minnesota State currently sitting in first place with 28 points, but they've played 14 games. Bemidji State now in the driver's seat, 3 points behind them with 2 games in hand at 25 points. Augustana at 24 points, just 1 point behind, but they've played one more game than Bemidji State with 13. Michigan Tech and Bowling Green at 22 and 21 points. They have played the same amount of games as Bemidji State. St. Thomas still with 1 game in hand on Bemidji State has 21 points. So, man, we've been talking all year about this top 6. That's the top 6, and they're all within 7 points of each other. And, of course, there's some games in hand that have to be had, but St. Thomas technically could still jump Minnesota State if they won all 3 of those games in regulation. It's tight top to bottom right now in that top 6. And then the bottom 3, again, still pretty far behind. All 3 have played 12 games. Lake State with 12 points in 12 games. Ferris State with 8 points, and Northern Michigan with just 4. So Lake State doing what they can early in the season to try to make sure they get in at one of those bottom 2 spots. We'll see if they can pick up any momentum later on in the season. But so far, again, it's looking just like everybody predicted, with that top 6 really being anybody's game so far. It's going to make every point matter that much more, and every weekend that much more stressful as we come down the back stretch of the season. But yeah, no hockey for Bemidji State until I believe it's the weekend of the 9th and the 10th against Michigan Tech, of course, outside of the exhibition, which I believe is the January 2nd, which is the weekend before that. So forgive me, I don't know if any of those games at the Sanford Center have happened yet for World Juniors. I really haven't been paying too close attention.
21st. So it's
coming up this
weekend. Or this weekend.
This weekend / next week ish. So yeah, Those are still waiting to be played at the Sanford Center. It's super exciting. Of course, the Spengler Cup, for anybody who's interested in that, will be starting up relatively soon. Again, I don't have the dates on that on hand, but I believe they're all being streamed for free on YouTube for anybody that is interested on that. So that's good. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of people want to follow hockey, Bemidji State hockey, World Junior hockey, other hockey, let me put it to you this way. The Quinn Hughes trade broke the Beaver Banter Discord. It was a blaze. People were talking about it, as everybody was. You know, it was a great time to be in the Beaver Banter Discord, even if Beaver hockey wasn't happening on Friday night. Why should people join?
They should join for reasons like that. You know, you have a place to go to talk about, you know, nobody in my family follows the Wild close enough to really know whether or not, like, they should be excited or not by this trade. And to be honest, I don't really follow hockey close enough to know whether or not we gave up too much or too little at that level. It felt like a lot to me, but you know, then people that follow it closer than I do in the Discord were able to tell me, oh no, it's, you know, he's a good player and you have to give up a lot to get good players. So yeah, join it for that reason. Join it because the NFL playoffs are rolling around. Join it because Beaver hockey season is in full swing. We do live game threads for every game there. Join it because we might get some playoff basketball for both of our programs this year. There's a lot yet to come for the Beaver Banter Discord, and it's the best place to be to chat with other Beaver fans about Beaver athletics.
And us. You know, sometimes when you go on Twitter and you put things out into the ether or Facebook or whatever, Blue Sky, I don't know, whatever social media apps you partake in, if you're still on MySpace, I guess. Anyway, if you're there's sometimes you have a sports take and it just gets tweeted out into the ether and nobody responds to it. Nobody's doing anything. This is a place where if you put your stuff in, we're going to be commenting with you. We're going to be talking with you the whole way. So it's a really fun time in the Beaver Banter Discord. Wrapping things up, Ian, we got a couple things with the show. WCHA hockey standings. Here's how things look in the points. For the women's hockey side of things, Wisconsin leads with 37, Ohio State 32, Minnesota 30, UMD 24, Minnesota State 17, St. Cloud 12, St. Thomas 10, Bemidji State 6 right now, as the games, kind of everybody on break here. Everybody's lined up now with a perfect 14 games played in the conference this week, I should say. So kind of that's where things stand as we took a look at the men's hockey stuff a moment ago. Here's where the Beavers stand for the women's hockey in their WCHA standings, and we'll see what can project forward. The thing about Bemidji State, they are on break for about as long as the men are, but they come back just a little bit earlier on January 3rd, where they go to Merrimack to take on Merrimack in North Andover for a weekend series there. So that's when they're going to come back, and we'll kind of pick up Beaver hockey then. So that's just an update for you. One last thing before we exit the show today, Ian, should be mentioned if we go to the pitch, Bemidji State has lost a pretty important member of their team to the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's disappointing. Julia Freed, defenseman for the Beaver soccer team, has transferred to the University of Iowa. So, again, we talked before the show. We're never going to be too disappointed if a player from a Division II university in Bemidji, Minnesota, decides that they have an opportunity in front of them to go Division I, especially Big Ten. Like, I know the football team had it.
He's got to live in Iowa, so that's like, you know, the main.
Yeah. Football had a guy jump up last year to go to the University of Illinois. Now we've got a soccer player going to the University of Iowa. And you know what? That's not that bad. Like, you can use that as a recruiting tool and all this and all that. And it's just cool for her, you know, to be able to realize that dream I'm sure that she had to go play Division I soccer. You know, that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to be competing at the highest level. And again, guys, we got to step back and take a look at it. It's Division II. Division I is higher than Division II, unfortunately. So for her, that's pretty cool. And it was good to have her while we did, and best of luck to her in the future.
Exactly. And not to take anything away from Division II women's soccer, because as we've learned and as we've seen with some high-level games in Bemidji, some dang good soccer. But yeah, there's just it's the allure of getting to play at a D1 level and getting to test yourself. And she's definitely earned the opportunity to get to do that. It stings, and it stings for this team. And obviously, given the binary choice of having her or not having her, you would like to have Freed still on the team. But overall, this is, like you said, it can weirdly be, I don't know how much it matters, but it can weirdly be a recruiting point to say, look at, if you come through this program, maybe you think you're D1 and you're not getting those D1 offers, come play for us for 2 years, get better, and another team will come calling for you. Like, something like that.
It's a little bit,
maybe not advertised, but
Yeah.
it's just something that a player can have in the back of their mind. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I don't think football last year was telling everybody like, yeah, come here and leave. Like, that's, not what's happening. But I think it's just it's the implication, you know what I mean? That like people come into this program and will get basically, a promotion up to Division I. You got to take that opportunity, and we're not going to falter for taking that, although we'd love to still have her on the team. If things don't work out in Iowa City, you can always come back to the Beavers. So that's,
it's a little bit similar to like, it's not the same situation, but like when Leighton Road leaves after 2 years to go to the AHL to play for Coachella Valley, he signs with the Seattle Kraken organization or whatever. It's like, okay, that stinks because he's a really good offensive player. Like, imagine Leighton Road with this group of offensive players we have right now, because he still could technically be on this team as a senior. That would be pretty nice. However, it's still pretty cool to see a Beaver jump up and make a chance to get to the NHL, which I do believe he'll be someday playing at that level. So it's cool either way,
Right, exactly. And you just appreciate the opportunities and that you get, and you kind of move on and figure it out from there and pick up the pieces. So that's when you combine losing Julia combined with losing Katrina Barthelt and some of the other seniors on this team, that pretty big shoes to fill. And as we've learned, Bemidji State can load up with some good players year in and year out. But man, that one, not the kind of soccer related article you were hoping to see in the first few weeks of the off season, but so is life, and they move on, and we'll see what happens with them as things develop over the course of the off season. I think that's going to do it for us, Ian. We are quickly approaching a holiday break. So for us as well, with the kind of, we'll
still be here.
We still got next week's show that we'll load up on, but then all of a sudden things get the holiday season coming up. So a lot of stuff happening, even as things are weirdly kind of getting ready to take a break. So it's the Beaver Banter podcast brought to you by Bemidji State Alumni and Foundation. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.